What's up, airplane collectors? Welcome to a model airplane review. It's your host Ray. In today's video, I'll be reviewing the Phoenix model 1-400 scale Lufthansa Airbus A340-600. This model was released in early 2023, and I just picked this one up today at my local model store. And in today's video, I'll be talking about the box, then the model itself, and at the end of the video, I will give my opinion about what I think of the model and whether or not I recommend it to other collectors. This is a pretty big model, and it's going to be a pretty long video, so sit back, relax, and let's get this party started. So starting off with the box is, I'm not sure what a standard Phoenix wide body box is because this is actually one of my first Phoenix models. It's at 19 centimeters lengthwise and height-wise and 4.5 centimeters wide. It seems pretty proportional to the model that it's carrying as well. So I'll show you around the box now. So here's the front, bottom, right side, top, left side, and here's the back. This box does not have a flap to see the model in the box. Once you open up the box, you get the model fully assembled, painted, and ready to go. Before I start my review, I'm going to give you a quick 360 of the model so you can get a good look around it. This model is quite large for both a 1-400 scale model and just in general. At 19 centimeters long for the fuselage length, 16 centimeters for the wingspan, and about 4.5 centimeters tall from the ground to the top of the vertical stabilizer. Accurate to 1-400 scale, and as I said, pretty large. This model is also made primarily out of die-cast metal. Starting up the review at the front of the aircraft, here we can see the nose section of the plane. Everything up here looks pretty good. Nose shape looks solid. This is my first time experiencing the Phoenix 1-400 scale Airbus A340-600 mold, and so far my first impressions are pretty good. There's also a molded Wi-Fi dome I just saw up here, or SAT dome up here. I'll talk about that later though, but everything looks pretty solid up here. Printing looks very nice. The Lufthansa title here looks good. It might be a little bit too saturated in terms of the color that it is. Looks like a little bit too much blue there. It should be a little bit less saturated. In my opinion, I'm not 100% sure though, but it still looks pretty solid nonetheless. As we move down the very long fuselage, you can see the printed detail is pretty solid so far. I don't notice any application issues in terms of paint or printed detail. So first impressions are pretty good so far. And we've reached the rear of the aircraft where you can see the Lufthansa.com and the registration. And my camera just decided to stop focusing there. Great. Here's the vertical stabilizer. The vertical stabilizer is the signature deep blue of Lufthansa with the logo of the bird. I think that's a crane. I'm not sure what kind of bird that's supposed to be. But everything looks pretty good up here. Molded detail is just for the rudder, which looks okay. Shape of the vertical stabilizer overall looks good. I notice a significant difference in the curve right about here before it hits the fuselage. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like that, but it still looks good nonetheless, so I won't say too much about it. Moving on to the right side of the fuselage, I won't provide much commentary, but everything I have said about the left side of the fuselage is also applicable to the right side of the fuselage. So pretty solid so far in terms of the fuselage and the vertical stabilizer. Moving on to the wings look pretty good in terms of overall detail. There is a mixture of printed, painted, and molded detail, albeit the molded detail is very hard to see. So printed detail is just these lines right here and the emergency exit lines as well. These look pretty good. Painted detail, the forward slats are painted silver, which is nice. The bottom of the wings are painted the signature gray, which I will show momentarily. But yeah, everything looks pretty good. You can barely see the control surface molding right there through the reflection of the light. The flaps and air brakes are replicated, which looks pretty good. Now the wingtips, I'd like to talk about the wingtips, these little winglet things. On the left side, this one looks pretty good. You can see the outside is gray like it should be, and the inside is white. However, on the right side, something went pretty wrong in terms of the paint application. You can see a lot of staining right here, and I can't seem to wipe it off, so I'm not sure what happened. I might be able to clean it off later, but it doesn't look too good. So yeah, quality control with paint application on the wings wasn't really the best. And you can see more staining on the trailing edge here. Yeah, very interesting. I'm not sure what happened. And on the flap fairings here, there was a little bit of a paint application issue right here since there's a white stain on the gray, which is rather interesting. So yeah, paint application on the wings didn't go that well. Bottom of the wings, like I said, they're painted the signature Lufthansa gray to match the underside of the fuselage as well. And down here, everything looks pretty good so far. I don't notice anything out of the ordinary. Just no printed detail down here like on most models. Moving back to the very long horizontal stabilizers here, I'd like to talk about these. These look pretty long, and I noticed that they seem to be a little bit asymmetrical, like they don't align too well. The one on the right side of the aircraft is bent backwards a little bit more than the one on the left side, and it's very hard to see, but you might be able to recognize that too. So alignment doesn't look the best there. In terms of detailing on the individual parts, though, it looks pretty good. Printed and painted and molded detail on the top of it looks good, and the bottom there's only painted and molded, which also looks solid. Oh, I noticed a few more stains back here. Yeah, there's a decent bit of staining on the wings on this aircraft. Moving on to the engines of this airplane, the large engines I should add, because these engines are pretty big. Here's what the engines look like. The fan blades look pretty good, but they're shaped rather questionably in terms of the spinner itself, because when I put my pointer over the spinner, on one of them, not on the left side here, but on the right side, on the engine number 3, there appears to be a sort of indentation instead of a point for where the spinner goes, which is very weird. I've never seen that on a 1/400 scale airplane. But regardless, the fans look pretty good. As for the outside of the engines, everything out here looks pretty good. Printed detail is pretty extensive, both on the engines themselves and the pylons, and the exhausts look pretty good and quite literally sharp, which is very nice. Bottoms of the engines also look very nicely detailed with a lot of painted and a lot of printed detail and even some painted detail. So very good so far. Moving on to aerial details, this model features both antennas and sat domes. So as I mentioned earlier, as I almost got distracted with, there is a molded sat dome on the forward end of the fuselage and one large antenna. Both of these look pretty good. The sat dome has outlined printing which aligns pretty well, so very solid so far. As we move down the fuselage, there is a larger sat dome, which is painted Lufthansa gray. Looks pretty dark, but I'm pretty sure that color is right, and it has an almost matte finish to it, or it appears to have an almost matte finish to it instead of gloss like the rest of the aircraft. So interesting how they changed the finish there. There's also a large antenna behind it and one more smaller antenna on the rear section of the aircraft. All these look pretty good. Attachment seems secure so they won't be falling out, and alignment, they seem mostly aligned, yet they seem pretty aligned with the vertical except for the last one there. They seem pretty aligned with vertical, which is very nice. Oh, and the one in the front of the aircraft is kind of bent towards the right. So alignment was decent. Just kidding, alignment wasn't actually very good up here. I just noticed the sat dome is also twisted towards the right side of the aircraft. You can barely see it from there, but if I tilt the aircraft up, you can definitely see the sat dome is a bit twisted. Here's the bottom of the aircraft, and down here we have one red antenna right here, which looks pretty good. Straight from here, I'm going to transition onto the landing gear. So we'll talk about the main landing gear first. Main landing gear is painted the iconic Phoenix silver, which looks pretty solid. The wheels all roll very nicely. I haven't checked the gear balance yet, but I will do that shortly. So yeah, gear looks pretty nicely detailed. Nose gear is also pretty solid. However, on the other example that I saw at the store where I bought this at, the nose gear was bent. So it appears as though the gears are 1, weak, and 2, very easy to bend, and they may arrive bent. However, it is possible to fix that kind of thing. It's just something to be cautious of if you're choosing to buy this model. For this section of the video, I'd like to talk about wing flex, gear balance, and oh my goodness, cockpit window printing. Yikes, that is bent. Well, very noticeably bent at least. You can definitely see the cockpit windows are bent towards the left side of the aircraft, which doesn't look very good at all. It's pretty messed up. Gear balance looks mostly symmetrical though, so that's one redeeming feature, and the wing flex is well within acceptable margins, so yeah, at least there's that. So wing flex, engine clearance, gear balance, and alignment of most things looks pretty good. Just the cockpit windows took the brunt of what usually it happens in terms of bad quality control on this section of the aircraft. And that concludes my review, and that was certainly an interesting review and very interesting first impressions for my first Phoenix aircraft. Now time for my personal opinion and recommendation. This model is pretty nice. It does have its faults. It has quite a few faults actually. But still, nonetheless, quality control can be, from what I can gather, hit or miss with Phoenix models. So, do I recommend this model? Yes. One, because it's incredibly highly sought after. So, if you're watching this video recently after its release, hurry up and get one of these because they're going to sell out like hotcakes. But yeah, quality control was questionable. So yes, I recommend you get this model. Just be careful. Know that you're gonna risk something in terms of quality control if you do buy this model. And regardless, from a distance, this model looks pretty nice anyway. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more model airplane content. I've got a few more models coming in, and I've been buying them like a madman once again. And that's all I've got for you today. Take care of yourselves. Hope to see you in my next video. See you later.